Yellow journalism once referred to the sensationalistic, lurid exaggerations of 19th century newspapers, the kind of sensational chauvinism that relied on distortions, outrage, and emotional manipulation to attract readers. The term itself emerged from the era of the Yellow Kid comic strip, whose popularity fueled a wave of sensational reporting and media manipulation. Today, the same spirit thrives, but its printing press is no longer ink and paper, it is the algorithm. This is Faith and Reason, and I'm your host, Timothy Berman. Stay tuned as we discuss yellow journalism and the rise of social media gainsayers when it comes to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Faith and Reason, and I'm your host, Timothy Berman, here to inspire you, encourage you, and edify you as we all are pressing forward with steadfast faith through Jesus Christ, because it is He that lives through us, not that we live according to our own will and purpose. So I was going through some of my old posts, and I happened to come across an old post back in 2012 where I wrote it with regards to yellow journalism and the anti-Mormon counter-cult movement. And reading through that, I decided I wanted to take that to update it and present it as part of this series that I'm going to be doing with regards to the Gainsayers, social media Gainsayers. And this is based on Titus 1:9, where the Apostle Paul counsels his disciple, who is in a position of local leadership there in Crete, with regards to answering, responding to, and dealing with those who are gainsayers. And so today's episode is going to introduce that. And we are going to talk about yellow journalism and the rise of social media gainsayers. And so take a moment and think about your own interactions with people who are critical of the church, who are either ex-Mormons or they're evangelical Christians or they're Roman Catholics, Orthodox, or Protestant. Because modern critics of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints have simply traded broadsheets for blogs, tabloids for TikTok, and pamphlets for podcasts. These tactics, however, remain unchanged. As before, the loudest voices are often the least informed. It is what the Apostle Paul refers to as those who are ever learning, yet never coming to understanding. And so these are individuals, they're groups who publish exaggerated claims. They're stripped of context. They're crafted for virality rather than truth. And the goal is not to understand. Their goal is to engage, not clarity. Their goal is to click. And so just as earlier counter-cult writers relied on lurid, exaggerated, sensationalistic claims to garner followers and readers, today's digital gainsayers rely on outrageous bait thumbnails, emotionally charged storytelling, selective screenshotting, and algorithm-friendly half-truths. This also consists of comment section echo chambers, so YouTube channels, and monetized deconstruction narratives. So many present themselves as compassionate guides who love the Mormons. I can't count how many times where somebody opens up with, love the Mormons, we have a heart for them, we desire for them. And yet their content reveals the same patterns that I identified years ago in my article. And these are claims built on exaggeration, their misrepresentation, and there is a blind devotion to cause. And as just before, these critics often silence corrective voices. They delete comments, they block faithful responders, or even stitching only the weakest LDS replies to create the illusion of intellectual victory. Yet, here's the irony of this, folks. The more these proliferate, the more people begin to ask questions. The more sensational the claim, the more likely someone is going to seek out an actual Latter-day Saint for clarification. Without proliferation of religious yellow journalism, people would not be investigating the church. In fact, we actually thank our critics. We thank those who are engaging in conversations about the church because it is getting people to talk. And even negativity draws attention to itself. And a lot of times, many people who end up hearing from our critics, hearing from those who are former members of the church, end up coming and actually talking to Latter-day Saints. And through that process, they actually investigate the church and they begin to study it for themselves. And the greatest missionary tool today are the gainsayers. They are the critics who have massive followings. Now, granted, that's just a drop in the bucket because the majority of the people are just basically idol worshiping these social media influencers who are propping themselves up for profit and gain. The look at me. This is what happened to me. Feel sorry for me. Here, click and donate to my ministry. Donate to, so they're setting it themselves up to build up their own castle. They are not concerning for the reality of truth. And that's not to say that all critics are doing that, but the most prominent ones set up their ministries and then ask for donations, solicit donations. And don't hear what I'm not saying, because soliciting donations is not wrong in and of itself. I mean, it takes money to operate, especially in the digital age, but it's the intent behind the reason for those donations. Why are you campaigning and wanting to get donations? And I'm kind of getting off track here a little bit. The irony is that the more these voices proliferate on social media, the more people are going to begin asking questions. The more sensational the claim, the more likely somebody's going to seek out and actually have conversations with Latter-day Saints for clarification. And without proliferation of religious yellow journalism, people would not be investigating the church. Now, I'm working on a series. This is introducing you to the series, Social Media Gainsayers, and I want to examine the modern forms of digital yellow journalism. Not to attack individuals, it's to illuminate the patterns, expose the very tactics, and strengthen discipleship. Because I want to walk through how we can explore the way critics manufacture outrage, how algorithms reward distortion, and how disciples of Christ may respond with clarity, charity, and conviction. And so we're not merely dealing with misinformation, we are navigating a spiritual battlefield where hearts and minds are being shaped by feeds, trends, and viral narratives. And yet, as always, truth shines brightest against the backdrop of distortion. And so the reality here, folks, is that the louder the critics' voices are getting, the louder our voice needs to get to match that. And so this is our moment to allow the light and glory of God to shine, to continue to preach and teach and be able to minister in this capacity. And so let's take a moment and look at the digital evolution of yellow journalism, because wherever written communication exists, yellow journalism follows. And in the age of TikTok, YouTube, podcasts, Reddit, and algorithm driven feeds, its reach has multiplied exponentially. It is in this digital landscape where we have the blend of information and entertainment where has become even more pronounced, where sensational stories often overshadow fact-based reporting. So modern platforms reward outrage because content that elicits strong emotional reactions captures attention, encouraging users to click, share, and even comment. And the cycle fuels further outrage that leads to an endless loop of sensationalism. And let's face it, inquiring minds. I mean, I remember back in the day that there would be commercials about the tabloids and the National Enquirer that would just make up some of the sensationalist stories that people just buy because they find it entertaining. They find it, it just kind of broke away from the normative of the news reporting and things like that. And so it thrived on that. That's why a lot of those tabloids were very successful, because they relied on this sensationalism and its emotional storytelling. It engages narratives that tug at the heartstrings, are more likely to go viral because the power of storytelling may easily overshadow the merits of accuracy. And it leads to a skewed perception of reality. And then there's the conflict, because stories that include controversy or confrontation thrive in the social media ecosystems. Audiences are drawn to disputes and debates, often blurring the line between fact and fiction as they consume content. And as a writer, I get it. When I sit down and I'm writing a story, I've got to open up with a conflict. I got to open up with something, as this is not, because the reader's going to open up and they're going to read the story from the very first chapter. And if you don't establish a conflict within that chapter, you're going to bore your reader. The reader wants conflict right out of the gate. In fact, with my book, Morning Ellen, that's one of the things I had to actually do when I went through and I've edited the first chapter so much that when I looked into it and I started reviewing that, and I'm looking at different models on how to capture the reader's interest, hook the reader, keep their interest, and developing that trust within the first few paragraphs. One of the things that was missing, that was pointed out to me, is that there was no established conflict. that the dynamic of the relationship between the character James and his beloved wife, Ellen, was very well established. People can get that, people can resonate with that, but it just doesn't seem to be the reality of how relationships are viewed in modern perspective. So I had to add conflict in there. And so I did just that. The conflict I added in there was that they overcame infidelity within their marriage. And so you kind of see that conflict. So even when it comes to storytelling, we want stories that have conflict. Think about Harry Potter, Star Wars, Wizard of Oz. There is a conflict that comes right out that draws you into that worldview. And this is how the Gainsayers, these Exmos, the Progmos, the apostates of the LDS faith, they latch onto this idea because they know it works. Because you don't fix what's not broken, you fix what is broken. And the one thing that is not broken is how it drives algorithm, how it drives clicks, how it drives content, how it drives conversations. And so conflict relies on stories that include controversy or confrontation because it thrives on the social media ecosystem. And we, by nature, are drawn to conflict. Okay. You cannot help to not look away from the train wreck because we want to know what happened. The looky loose driving down the freeway, you want to look and see who. And so we want conflict. And then there's the polarization. The digital age has created a divided audience where content that supports or criticizes particular viewpoints often receives heightened levels of engagement. This polarization may amplify misunderstandings and grievances. Short form exaggeration, with the rise of platforms centered around brief content bursts, exaggeration has become a common tactic to capture attention quickly. This brevity may lead to misinterpretations and half truths that are being widely accepted. And then you have viral half truths. Misinformation may spread like wildfire, with half truths often being more enticing than the full context. This phenomena reflects a concerning trend in how information is disseminated today. So within this atmosphere that has been created because of the digital landscape, the internet and what has happened because of it, it created a perfect environment for social media gainsayers, individuals or groups who build influence, identity, and sometimes income by attacking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints through sensationalistic content. In fact, one of when you go to places like Faithful Answers Informed Response, which they had recently changed their name from, I believe, Foundational Apologetic, I can't remember the original, but the whole point of that website and what they put together came from these individuals who are engaged in the conversations on America Online and the constant barrage of critics that were in those chat rooms. I mean, I remember back in the day, you go to the chat room and you say you're allowed to say, boom, you're bombarded with a bunch of information. You go to the message forums and you're like, you're bombarded by all these critics and everything. It paved the way for individuals or groups who build influence, identity, and sometimes income by attacking the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints through sensationalistic content. And so these gainsayers are going to exploit the factors mentioned above to fuel their narrative. And they're often prioritizing sensationalism over accuracy to attract followers and engage in viral discourse. And this is not only about misrepresenting the church, it also contributes to a broader culture where sensationalism is valued over truth, leading to further conflicts and misunderstandings within and beyond the community. Now, my focus here is specifically on the gainsayers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but we see this happening within the realm of politics. Politics is a whole nother ballgame there, folks, but you have people engaging in sensationalism and commentary because the point is to draw in attention, hook the person, and then engage in conversations. And so their methods are not new. Only the medium has changed. So let's talk about anti-LDS rhetoric from pamphlets to TikTok. Since the rise of the restored gospel in the 19th century, critics have published a steady stream of accusations, distortions, and misrepresentations. In fact, the very first true anti-Mormon literature is Mormonism Unveiled. Every criticism has been meticulously examined, thoroughly answered, and carefully contextualized by scholars, historians, and faithful members of the LDS community. Despite our diligent efforts in this field, the criticisms continue to persist, not because they possess an intrinsic truth, They persist because they are useful for various agendas. So, in the digital age, critics no longer rely on traditional methods such as printing presses or established publishers to disseminate their viewpoints. Instead, they harness modern technology, requiring only a few simple tools to reach a vast audience. They need a smartphone with a decent camera, a ring light for improved video quality, a TikTok account to tap into trending formats, a monetized YouTube channel to generate potential income, a podcast microphone for engaging audio content, and Reddit thread to foster community discussions. Once these elements are in place, the algorithm does the rest, amplifying content far beyond its original scope. In this new arena, the case of access to technology enables anybody with an opinion to share their thoughts instantaneously, regardless of the depth or accuracy of their assertions. Many of these individuals present themselves as compassionate guides who love the Mormons and simply aim to help people out of deception. Their self proclaimed altruism masks a more complex reality. The content they produce often reveals a different intention, lurid exaggerations crafted for engagement, not for truth. The sensational approach, designed to capture attention and provoke reactions, may mislead audiences seeking authentic information. As these critics gain followers, their narratives become increasingly entrenched, creating echo chambers where misinformation thrives. The rise of social media has not only changed the landscape of criticism, it has also transformed how information is consumed and interpreted. As such, it is crucial for viewers to remain discerning, actively seeking credible sources and fact checking claims rather than falling prey to the allure of dramatized content designed to distract from more nuanced discussions about faith, tradition, and personal beliefs. So let's take a moment and kind of talk about apostates, ex Mormons, and the rise of influencer counter-cultism, because there remains an important distinction between who an ex Mormon is compared to who an apostate is. Now, ex Mormons simply just leave the church. They make a personal choice to distance themselves from the beliefs and practices they once followed. This departure may be motivated by various personal experiences, disillusionment, or a search for a new belief system. Now, many ex Mormons find themselves in a healing process that involves redefining their personal identity outside of the confines of their previous faith. And not all ex Mormons will jump upon the bandwagon of actually attacking the church. Majority, most ex Mormons I've personally encountered myself could care less, to be honest with you. They're not actively out there chasing down missionaries to actively engage in conversations with them to in hopes to get them in a gotcha and try to sway them away from it. If they come into contact with a missionary or they come in contact with a faithful member of the church and they're like, it wasn't for me. I just left because of, and sometimes they don't even give a reason. And, it's none of my business for the reason that they left. But they're like, if you want to believe in the church, believe in the church. If you don't, I just don't find that it's true. They're not being contentious. They're not being argumentative. They're not engaging in attacking. They're just telling you their perspective and the reason why. Apostates, on the other hand, though, they're actively campaigning against the church. They're often taking a more vocal and sometimes confrontational stance. Apostasy is not merely about leaving, it is involving a commitment to criticizing the very organization and its teachings. In the age of social media, apostasy has evolved into a very distinct content genre that attracts considerable attention. Some individuals who identify themselves as apostates join established countercult ministries. They're leveraging their experiences to warn others about what they perceive as the dangers of the church. These ministries often provide a platform for shared testimonies and an array of resources aimed at those seeking to leave similar organizations. Now, look, don't hear what I'm not saying. If people leave the church and they want to have a group of people around them to provide support and encouragement, fine. That's fine. I'm okay with that. But when that support turns into let's team up on the Mormons, that's where it becomes problematic. That's where it becomes you turn this Facebook group into an echo chamber because you go back and you proverbially slap one another on the back and say, "Attaboy, you sure cooked that person." So it becomes a claim of stolen victory and valor and prideful ego strokes. But if you just want to have a group of people to where you want to deconstruct, want to get support and have conversations about what it was like to be a member of the church. And then now you're not a member of the church. And it's not about attacking the church, but it's just about finding and navigating through that. That's fine. Okay. That's why we have recovery support groups. That's why we have people who seek out fellowship and support. And so we need to be clear and distinct on that, because some individuals who identify themselves, like I said, as apostates, going to establish counter-cult ministries. They leverage their experiences to warn others about what they perceive as the dangers of the church. These ministries often provide a platform for shared testimonies and an array of resources aimed at those seeking to leave similar organizations. Others take a more personal approach by building their own platforms through blogs, reels, live streams, or storytime confessionals. It is in this digital landscape where many operate independently, crafting their own narratives while others collaborate with well-funded organizations. And these well-funded organizations are have well-established audiences. This collaboration often leads to greater outreach, providing a sense of community among those who have left the faith. With the rise of social media monetization opportunities, these become more in the realms of flourishing, where they get louder and more vocal, because it enables these creators to turn their experiences into a source of income. They monetize their content through various means, such as ad revenue. Many platforms offer revenue sharing for content creators based on views and engagement. Affiliate links. By promoting products or services, creators may earn a commission on sales generated through their referrals. Patreon subscriptions. Fans and supporters may financially back creators on platforms like Patreon, providing a steady income stream in exchange for exclusive content. Book royalties. Authors of anti-LDS literature may see substantial earning potential. There's one prolific critic of the LDS faith who is a former member of the church, who is an apostate, who has his own website and is consistently promoting his books that attack the church, and is getting frustrated that nobody is supporting him financially. And so a lot of these generate thousands in royalties. And then you have the speaking engagements. Those with the strongest backstories often find opportunities to share their experiences at speaking events, workshops, where it further enhances their public profile. And I'm not going to share one of the most prominent podcasts out there right now that is in a legal conflict with the church, but that's the type of thing I'm talking about here, because the digital platforms are amplifying a single voice. They're enabling a viral TikTok series to generate substantial financial gains, sometimes rivaling traditional publishing methods, all within just a few weeks. The financial incentive to sensationalize personal experiences and testimonies is stronger than ever. As the competition for views and engagement becomes increasingly fierce, this dynamic creates a rich tapestry of narratives vying for attention and often reflecting deeply personal journeys intertwined with broader societal themes about belief, identity, and the impact of faithful transitions. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying, because I'm not saying that if you want to become a content creator, that you should avoid monetizing. I think the ability to monetize is great, but it's how you are going about and doing it. Because if you're doing it to monetize so you can reap the benefits of that as a way to support your lifestyle, then that is probably not the reason to monetize. But if you monetize because you recognize that God has called you into a position to where you do that, you do need money to pay for a lot of the services that most content creators utilize. You have to pay the subscriptions for their plans, because nothing is free. It costs money. And to have some type of financial backing, unless you are a very affluent individual who maybe just came in and an enormous amount of inheritance, and you can really afford it without any detriment to yours. But a lot of times, even Latter-day Saint content creators are able to monetize their content. But think about it. It is not actually something that you can survive and live on until you actually build up that following. But then it comes into a question: are you doing it to build up the kingdom of God? What are you doing with the funds? Because if you're doing it to support your life, we are not. This is where you get into the fine line of precrast and everything. And so monetization in itself is not bad. It's the intent behind that monetization is what I'm actually talking about. Digital contents of modern yellow journalism. Countercult influencers employ a predictable set of tactics that effectively manipulate their audience and reinforce their narratives. These strategies not only serve to bolster their own positions, it serves to create a divisive atmosphere among viewers and participants in online discourse. It basically comes down to the reality of it's us versus them. We have the truth, they don't. And sometimes, I hate to say this though, sometimes there are Latter-day Saint creators who actually do this themselves, where it's like, we hold the truth. So there's that arrogance, that pride, that sense of superiority. And all these strategies do is to bolster their own positions. Yet it also creates a divisive atmosphere among viewers and participants in online discourse. And so as we navigate through the complexities of social media and online engagement, we want to understand these tactics because it becomes essential for discerning critical consumers of information. So number one, selective storytelling. This involves the utilization of selective storytelling where only the most extreme, unusual, or misunderstood statements are highlighted. By stripping these statements of context, nuance, or historical grounding, influence may craft a compelling narrative that appears persuasive on the surface. This tactic often exaggerates the reality of individuals or groups they critique, leading audiences to form biases based on partial truths. The impact of selective storytelling extends beyond individual posts. It actively shapes broader public perceptions and may misinform entire communities about the subject at hand. Audiences may find themselves adopting these skewed narratives as truths, leading to a significant distortion of understanding. Next is the algorithmic outrage. Another key tactic is understanding the algorithmic outrage. Content creators design their posts to provoke the strongest emotional reactions from viewers, particularly outrage, as this is known to increase watch time and overall reach on social media platforms. The more emotionally charged the content, the more likely it is going to be shared, it's going to be liked, it's going to be commented on, which ultimately feeds back into the algorithm and elevates their visibility, further entrenching their influences. This cycle not only perpetuates the popularity of the influencer's content, it also normalizes the vitality in the discourse. As audiences increasingly expect and engage with content that elicits a strong emotional response. One of my favorite lines out of the original Roadhouse with Patrick Swayze is that Patrick Swayze is standing before the employees of this bar that he's trying to assist in revitalizing and improve the clientele. And somebody says, "What if somebody calls me explicit name?" And Patrick Swayze responds with, "It's two nouns put together to elicit a prescribed response." And there's truth to that. When you understand the how the algorithm works, it works on outrage. It works on the sensationalism. And so let's talk about the YouTube comment section. The more outrageous somebody posts in a comment section that garners a follow-up of multiple comments, back and forth commentary, and the outrageous claims and all of that, the algorithm is not going to care who's right or wrong. It's not going to care what words. It just says this is we're going to push this out because this is engagement. And so the algorithm just sees the engagement. It doesn't care whether one person is right or the other person is wrong. It doesn't care about logical fallacies, or it doesn't care about ad hominems or personal insults. It doesn't care about derogatory remarks or vernacular. It just says, this is engaging. People are responding. People are commenting. Let's push this out to generate more. Okay. So that's the key. So the more emotionally charged the content, the more likely it is to be shared, liked, and commented on because it ultimately feeds back into the algorithm and elevates their visibility, further entrenching their influence. One of the things that I am learning is because I used to just, and I'll get to this too, because this is part of the discussion. But one thing that I'm learning is I used to not, when somebody comes into my comment sections on my blog posts or on my YouTube channel or within a particular, on my Facebook page and profile and things like that, when they post some very derogatory, I mean, unless it's just completely out of line, that's in violation of the established community standards of YouTube and Facebook and all that, then I will remove that comment. But if it's just a negative comment and things like that, I've learned that you don't delete that because that draws in engagement. And so as an LDS content creator, we shouldn't be removing comments unless they're like very abusive, very personal, very derogatory, and in violation of the community standards. But if they're just coming in and saying Joseph Smith is a false prophet, he's a PDF, and all this, don't delete that comment because people are going to respond to that. Again, that's how the algorithm is going to work. And so we also need to use it to our benefit. And when you watch LDS content creators on TikTok, when they're engaging it, there's a reason why they're posting the prompts because it draws engagement. When people get up onto those panels and they start talking and it's getting heated, it's getting passionate, and people are talking over each other, it's driving the engagement because TikTok is like, this is a very active one, this is very engaging, so it's going to push it out to draw more people in. That's what we're talking about here. So the cycle not only perpetuate popularity of the influencer's content, it also normalizes the volatility in discourse as audiences increasingly expect and engage with content that elicits a strong emotional response. Over time, such outrage driven content may lead to a climate of heightened tension and hostility towards differing viewpoints. And then three, comment curation. In a bid to shape the discourse, these influencers engage in comment curation. Faithful or reasoned responses are often deleted, blocked, or hidden, allowing only the weakest or most simplistic counterarguments to be presented. This manipulation creates an illusion of intellectual dominance as superficial critiques are showcased while legitimate dialogue is silenced. The result is a skewed perception of the debate, reinforcing the influencer's position. Furthermore, by strategically highlighting these weak counterarguments, influence may undermine the credibility of opposing voices, making it seem as though they lack substance or support. This tactic effectively discourages meaningful exchange and promotes an environment where dissenting ideas are either disregarded or ridiculed. And then you have the manufactured authority, the fourth point. Manufactured authority is another critical tactic. Influencers frequently present themselves as experts, despite lacking formal training or even qualifications within fields of theology, history, or religious studies. This self styled authority may mislead audiences who may be swayed by confidence rather than expertise, leading to the propagation of misinformation under the guise of credibility. The danger of this tactic lies in its ability to create false narratives that are accepted as factual by followers, as audiences often do not conduct further research or seek out alternative viewpoints. As a result, the influencers become gatekeepers of information that may significantly alter public perception around specific issues or events. Now, one of the things that was prominent when I was uh, coming up into apologetics is that one of the things that you would commonly hear in person and then in the digital landscape as the internet was getting underway and improving and progressing the way it has is that you would have people who would say, well, I used to be a member of the church, and then they would list out, I had this calling, I was a seminary teacher, then I was an institute teacher, and I was a calling, I had this calling, I had that calling, and I know Mormonism better than you do because I was a Mormon, and these are the callings that prove that I know more than you do. That's the attitude. But then it brings us to the last point. The echo chamber reinforcement is a prominent strategy. Influencers cultivate communities around shared grievances and viewpoints and reward and escalate content that confirms existing biases. This creates an insular environment where dissenting opinions are minimized and radical perspectives gain traction. The echo chamber effect not only solidifies existing beliefs, it can also intensify them, leading to further polarization. Within these spaces, individuals tend to become increasingly entrenched in their worldviews and presuppositions, forming a closed loop of affirmation that excludes critical engagement with opposing ideas. This deepening of division may pose serious challenges to constructive discussions and collaborative problem solving in broader societal contexts. I remember during the Mormon campaign, there was a bunch of Facebook book groups, both from Latter-day Saints and from critics of the church, those who have left the church, where Facebook groups are just popping up left and right. And then people say, well, I'm talking with this individual. And then they would go and get their online buddies to come in and attack that one person and just comment drop just a bunch of stuff. And then they would run back into their Facebook groups that was closed off because you had to be approved member to be in that group, and they wouldn't allow Latter-day Saints in there to discuss or anything. And so they would do that. And, same thing for Latter-day Saints. We did the same thing in our Facebook groups at the time. But here's the thing. These tactics represent modern yellow journalism in its purest form because employing selective storytelling, harnessing algorithmic outrage, curating comments, manufacturing authority, and reinforcing echo chambers, countercult influencers skillfully manipulate narratives to maintain control over their audiences and to perpetuate their ideological stances. When we recognize these strategies, it becomes crucial in order to foster a more informed and discerning public that is capable of navigating the complexities of modern digital engagements with a critical eye. Understanding and countering these influences may empower individuals to participate in a more balanced discourse, promoting an environment conducive to healthy debate and diverse perspectives. There is a hypocrisy of the Gainsayers, though. Many critics claim persecution when their pages are challenged or their misinformation is corrected. They insist that attempts to address their errors are attacks on their freedom of speech. Yet these same individuals often reveal a troubling tendency that undermines their credibility, which is a mark of lack of openness to constructive criticisms and honest dialogue. In their quest to maintain their perspective, they resort to deleting corrective comments that highlight inaccuracies in their assertions. Rather than engaging with valid points made by others, they choose to block faithful responders who aim to provide clarity and context. This behavior raises an essential question about their commitment to genuine discourse. When faced with challenges to their viewpoints, some of them may mock Latter-day Saint apologists instead of engaging in a productive exchange of ideas. Their approach may often resemble schoolyard level ridicule, which detracts from the possibility of sincere debate. It becomes evident that their responses are less about fostering a transparent conversation and more about defending an unfounded narrative. Even when confronted with clear corrections to their claims, these individuals frequently promote falsehoods, showcasing a troubling disregard for truth, and their continued propagation of inaccuracies suggests that their devotion is not to truth. Their devotion is to their narrative. This entrenched mindset often stifles constructive dialogue because it also perpetuates confusion among their audiences who may be misled by their unchecked assertions. Now, I mentioned this, but there's the unexpected blessing of modern criticism because the proliferation of yellow journalism has an unintended effect. It drives people to seek out the truth. Many who encounter sensationalistic claims eventually ask real Latter-day Saints for clarification. They discover that the caricatures do not match the lived faith of many of the members. Instead of relying on solely the distorted portrayals presented by critics, these individuals take the initiative to engage directly with members of the faith, seeking out genuine conversations and insights. Through these interactions, they find answers, context, and spiritual grounding that are often missing within sensationalist viewpoints and narratives. As these individuals explore the authentic beliefs and practices of Latter-day Saints, these seekers begin to develop a nuanced understanding of the faith. They learn about the history, they learn about the values and community aspects that form the foundation of this religious tradition. This process often leads them to a deeper appreciation for the complexity of faith and the diversity of beliefs within community. It is in this way the critics become accidental missionaries. Unwittingly, their exaggerated claims and sensational stories compel individuals to dig deeper and find the truth for themselves. This journey of exploration fosters not only personal growth, it promotes dialogue and understanding between individuals of different backgrounds. Ultimately, the quest for truth transforms initial skepticism into a more informed perspective, bridging gaps and building connections among diverse communities. And so let's face the reality here. The digital age is a spiritual minefield in battle because we are living in a time when hearts and minds are being shaped by feeds, by trends, and viral narratives. The adversary uses distortion, he uses confusion and sensationalism to pull souls away from Christ. Yet, disciples of Jesus Christ are called to respond with specific qualities that may guide us through the tumultuous landscape of modern life. We are called to clarity. In an age where misinformation spreads rapidly, clarity is essential. We need to seek to understand the truth and be well versed in the teachings of Christ. By being clear in our beliefs and our communication, we are able to counteract the noise and provide a solid foundation for others seeking guidance. Charity is where, amidst the chaos, charity is going to define our interactions. We are called to love one another, even when faced with differing opinions or beliefs. This love, demonstrated through acts of kindness and understanding, is what may bridge divides and show the world the true nature of Christ's teachings. So, this is where we are to be peacemakers. We are to be bridge. Uh, um, where we are to bridge the conversations. It is through charity that we are able to nurture relationships and foster communities that reflect His love. And then there's conviction. Our conviction in the truth of the gospel needs to remain steadfast. In moments of doubt or challenge, it is crucial to hold firm to our beliefs. This unwavering faith not only strengthens ourselves, it also inspires those around us to explore their own spiritual journeys. Conviction empowers us to stand against the tides of culture that seek to lead us astray. And then testimony, but when we share our personal testimonies, it may be a very powerful tool in this modern age. Each story of faith, struggle, and triumph serves as a testament to God's influence in our lives by articulating our experiences and how they align with the teachings of Jesus Christ. We are able to resonate with others and encourage them to seek their own relationship with Him. One of the things I want to note here, though, folks, is I personally do not give my testimony unless it is a last resort. And what I mean by that is that, again, going back to the old school apologetics that I am, that when members were just standing on their testimony and they would get and find themselves in conversations, whether in person or online, they would just bear their testimony to that person. What critics ended up doing, especially within the social media, prominently Facebook at the time, message forums, is that when a member would then bear their testimony because they realize that they cannot engage in conversations with a critic because the critic is either dominating the conversation or just throwing out a bunch of gish gallops or is being just slanderous and logical fallacies left and right. And the members say, well, you know what, for me, the church is true. And they'll go off and they'll type out or state their testimony. Well, the critic responds back, say, well, I'm going to testify to you that the church is false. And so they will bear their testimony. And now it's testimony against testimony. So it causes confusion. So one of the things that I would recommend, that if you're going to engage in apologetics, keep your testimony as an end of discussion, as a last resort, and do it with boldness and conviction, and be discerning, because the Spirit's going to let you know when you can. And there's ways that I do it that I don't even have to just say, well, I bear you my testimony. Just say, well, this is what I've studied. This is what the scholarship shows. And this is what I'm resting my understanding and my reality and how I'm approaching the scripture, because it confirms what I received by way of the Holy Spirit. This is what it confirms. So in a way, I'm bearing my testimony, but I'm saying it has been confirmed through these processes. But it is important that we stand on our testimony, because our testimony is not for the individual critic. Our testimony is for those who may be watching or listening. And the light is the final component to this, because we need to allow our light to shine brightly in a world increasingly shaped by digital shadows. What this means is that we engage with the world around us positively and actively, promoting hope and truth. By embodying the light of Christ in our actions and words, we are able to illuminate the path for others who might be lost or seeking direction. Now, all of this is based on what Paul gives counsel to Titus in dealing with the Gainsayers. This is Titus 1 through 9. And so this is the apostolic mandate for responding to critics. Long before social media existed, Paul warned early saints about a particular kind of critic, the gainsayer. The term appears in Titus 1:9, where Paul instructs the leaders to hold fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayer. Let me say that again. Hold fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able to, by sound doctrine, both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. A gainsayer is somebody who contradicts truth, somebody who speaks against the faith, somebody who resists sound doctrine, somebody who's challenging the teachings of Christ, and somebody who does so with confidence, boldness, and often hostility. In other words, the Apostle Paul is describing the very dynamic Latter-day Saint content creators face today. Individuals who come hot out of the gate, aggressively challenging testimony, doctrine and faith. These gainsayers are not merely passively skeptical, they are actively opposing the beliefs and principles that many hold dear. Their presence may create a significant tension within communities as they seek to undermine the faith of those who are steadfast and loyal. Paul does not tell Titus to ignore them. He does not tell him to remain silent. He does not tell him to avoid conflict at all costs. Instead, he acknowledges the reality of such challenges and addresses the necessity to respond with conviction and commitment to the truth. Paul commands three essential actions. Number one, hold fast the faithful word. This command encourages believers to stay deeply rooted in scripture, testimony, and revealed truth. It's a reminder that one's foundation should be built on a solid understanding of the faith, enabling each one of us to withstand the doubts and the contradictions posed by gainsayers. The steadfastness is crucial for maintaining a strong testimony in a world full of conflicting ideologies. Second is the exhort. We are to exhort. Here, the call is to teach, to clarify, to correct, and uplift. Exhortation is not just about reiterating what is known, it is involving an active engagement with others, sharing insights, and providing guidance that may illuminate the path of faith. This engagement also fosters an environment where questions may be asked and answers provided in love and understanding. And then three, we are to convince the gainsayers. This command demands that the believers expose error, they dismantle falsehood, and defend the doctrine of Christ. This does not mean engaging in fruitless arguments or being contentious, but rather fulfilling a responsibility to articulate the truth clearly and effectively. It's about pointing out inaccuracies with respect and grace, helping those misled by false narratives to see the light of truth. And folks, one thing that I've learned over the years is you really need to listen to the Holy Spirit, because there's going to come a point in these conversations where you know that you're not going to, whatever you say is not going to convince this person. They're not going to accept the reality that they're wrong. All you can do is take them to the very scriptures, take them to the very context, and walk them through it. And if they continue to argue against it, if they continue to kick against the pricks, at some point you step away. You stop responding. If you're you're having you're on a YouTube channel and you're commenting to somebody and it's a back and forth, eventually you're just going to have to just decide, I'm going to step away from this. I'm not going to respond, because you then are going to get into a situation where it becomes contentious. And trust me, the Holy Spirit's going to let you know that you need to let this go and move along. Because sometimes you just have to say, you know what? I've provided you what you said. I steel manned your arguments. I provided the actual context. I walked you through this. It seems that you're not willing to hear what I have to say. So have a good day and be blessed and be encouraged. And then you just walk away, because the last thing that a critic is going to expect is you to go silent. Because the moment you go silent, two things are going to happen. One, they're going to try to egg you on to engage in conversation. Two, they're going to claim, I silenced him, I shut him down, he can't respond. See, he can't respond to my arguments. He hasn't responded to my arguments. And it's all a trap to get you to egg you on. So Paul's counsel establishes a pattern that all of us need to take to heart. Trust must be defended. It is essential to affirm what is right and true in all convictions, both public and private. By doing so, we not only protect our faith, it is also that we are protecting the faith of others who may be wavering. Falsehood needs to be corrected. This is not merely an academic or theological exercise. It is a moral and spiritual obligation on our part. When we engage with falsehood, we need to do so by correcting it as a way to steer others away from potential harm. When you're dealing with a critic, you're not talking to that critic specifically. You may be responding, you may be answering their questions, you may be walking them through a particular passage of scripture, walking them through the context to hopefully get them to understand and see how you arrived to the way you arrived, and doing that. But the reality is that you're not actually speaking to that critic. You are speaking to the audience, watching the dialogue occur, because people are paying attention. And one of the things that I usually say is that when they start saying, I exposed you, da, 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 I will respond back saying, well, people who come in and see this comment thread and discussion will see will come to determine who is actually attempting to engage faithfully in the conversation and who is engaging in attacking, insulting, and mocking the other person. Because people are not dumb. Gainsayers need to be answered is the next point. This is not merely an academic or theological exercise. It is a moral and spiritual obligation. That's falsehood, must be corrected. I'm sorry. Gainsayers need to be answered. Silence in the face of opposition may be seen as tacit agreement. Thus, addressing gainsayers not only validates the concerns of others, but also affirms the belief in the teachings of Christ. Now, again, don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying go out of your way to engage in every conversation and comment thread of a gainsayer who is attacking the church. If you find yourself where you're posting something on your social media and a critic comes in and drops a comment, respond to that comment. Don't delete it, respond to it, walk them through. If they continue to persist, let it breathe, give it some room to breathe. And then eventually you then walk away from that conversation. You don't just, this person says Joseph Smith is a false prophet. Yeah, goodbye, delete, block. No, engage. Well, how is Joseph? How do you come to that conclusion that Joseph Smith is a false prophet? Walk me through your process with that. What brought you to that understanding? Well, da 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 da. And be prepared that they're going to respond with a gish gallop, and just say, okay, let's focus on one point at a time. You mentioned that he had failed prophecies. What prophecies do you believe that? What's one of the prophecies you believe that he that was not fulfilled? Okay, let's walk through that. Let's go to the actual text, because now what you're doing is you're forcing the critic to actually engage in their own criticism. And they don't like that, because when you start walking them through the context, they don't want to deal with the context. They don't want to deal with the scripture. They don't want to deal with that breakdown, because then it confronts their own bias, it confronts their own prejudice, and it confronts their own presuppositions that they've held on to. And they don't want to be challenged, yet they want to challenge us. So gainsayers need to be answered, because silence in the face of opposition may be seen as a tacit agreement. Thus, addressing gainsayers not only validates the concerns of others, it also affirms the belief in the teachings of Christ. And this leads us to an important question for our time. What is the difference between contending for the faith and engaging in the spirit of contention? One, doctrine needs to be upheld. Upholding the truth means consistently advocating for the core tenets of faith and doctrine, which creates a solid front against distortions and misrepresentations. Because remember, when we get into these conversations, we are protecting our faith and testimony, as well as protecting the faith and testimonies of other members. And so we want to see them, how we as Latter-day Saints are able to respond to the critics. Silence is not the apostolic model. Clarity is. The call is to be articulate and assertive in sharing the faith, providing a clear message that resonates with both believers and seekers alike. This active defense of the faith cultivates a community that thrives on understanding, support, and shared truth, effectively countering the challenges posed by critics and ensuring that the message of the gospel remains strong and unwavering. And so Paul's instruction to Titus reveals a crucial truth for us today. There is a righteous way to confront critics, and then there is an unrighteous way. The former is commanded, the latter is condemned. The distinction is often misunderstood within Latter-day Saint community today, especially as members navigate online spaces where critics attack boldly and expect saints to remain passive. And so in my next episode, I am going to talk about contending for the faith versus the spirit of contention. If this has been helpful for you today, drop a comment, hit that like, share, and click that notification bell, as I'm going to continue the series on the social media gainsayers. And this is just to introduce you to the concept and the series. And so hit that like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And until next time, be blessed, be encouraged, be inspired through Jesus Christ.